Good evening to you. Delighted to see you. Have some visitors. I want you to know that you are certainly welcome to be with us. Let me mention, I think, the obvious. Next Sunday is a fifth Sunday. However, we are not going to have a covered dish dinner. There's a couple of reasons. One, half the congregation is going to be gone having their own covered dish dinner. And so we don't want to do that, infringe on that. Those people are going to be gone for the youth unplugged retreat. And really the reason is with Dr. Ritchie coming, we're going to have plenty of dinners. And we just didn't want to have to lay that on all of our ladies. Now, some of our guys say, well, what's the problem? Well, the problem is you need to think about your ladies. They're the ones that have to do that, generally speaking. And so on Saturday of the workshop, after the morning sessions, we're going to have a catered dinner. And you're invited to stay. Hope you will. And hope you'll invite folks to come with you who will stay. We plan for that to be kind of a relaxed setting, and you have the opportunity to meet him maybe in a little more intimate way and ask your questions, discuss matters with him. And then on that Sunday, we are going to have our covered dish dinner. So we'll be having two opportunities to eat together here very, very soon. Now, although this is a fifth Sunday and we're not going to have a covered dish dinner and our services are going to be at the normal time, I still will be dealing with questions and answers. And the reason for that is you have submitted a number of very good ones. And I don't want to get them all backed up, whereas you say, what happened to my question? I want to answer it in a timely way, so please come and be present for that, if you will. Also, next Sunday, since we're going to have a number of our people gone on Sunday morning, if you could just write me a note on your way out and say, I'm going to be here. It would be helpful to me when I'm trying to make out a schedule of who can do what. So if you're going to be available next Sunday morning, then just please take a little note, sign it. If you just say, I'm going to be here, I may not know who that is, but sign it, and that will help me in putting the schedule together. We are bringing our little series of sermons on church growth to a close. Now, that doesn't mean that we've exhausted all of the things that can be said, but it means that that's all that we're going to say at this time. You'll be hearing more about this as we continue to grow and develop as a congregation. The title, every sermon has to have a title, you know, is We're in This Together. And I think we need to remember that. This is not a one-man show. It's not even a 2 or 3-man show. Every person who's a member of the congregation here ought to be involved in what we're trying to do. And yet, we often count one person as being the one who causes it to grow or not to grow. I'm rather amused at this point in the college football season because we already have coaches who are on the hot seat. Their jobs are being threatened because their teams are not winning. Are they the reason? Maybe. Maybe not. It takes more than one person to win a football game. And we need to understand it takes more than one person to cause a church to grow. I was talking with an elder more years ago than I care to remember. They had hired a preacher for the little church where he was. He said to me, he said, I believe preachers are just laborers. You hire them and you fire them. And I thought, do you know why you're not growing? Do you know why things are not going well where you are? It's that kind of attitude. It is true that preachers are hired and fired. But let me tell you, you can't hire a preacher that will guarantee a church growth. You just can't do it. Because it's a bigger job than that. It involves what the preacher does. It involves what the leadership of the church does, elders, deacons. It involves what every person who sits in one of the pews does. If you remember the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, and Nehemiah, who had been cupbearer to the king, decided he wanted to do something about it. Now, he didn't have a whole lot of wall building experience. That didn't matter. He was heartbroken that the city was lying in ruin. And he got a bunch of people together and they went to Jerusalem. They laid the plans and they started to work. And in 53 days, they rebuilt the wall. And what the secret was? And the people had a mind to work. Doesn't say that Nehemiah had a mind to work. Doesn't say just some of the priests had a mind to work. It says the people, all of them, had a mind to work. If we are to grow and develop as we want to as a congregation, and we are certainly headed in that direction, I think there are some mutual attitudes that are necessary. Last week, if you remember, I talked about our attitudes toward ourselves as a part of the program. I want to talk tonight about our attitude toward ourselves together, working together to cause that to happen. I want to talk about teamwork. I want to talk about all of us together doing our best to grow this church with God's blessings. So you can write these down. There's only going to be a few of them. They're not complex, but I think they are important. First of all, write down the term brotherly love. I have seen churches torn apart, and maybe you have too. When they get to that point where they are growing and progressing and good things are happening and they're thinking about building a building, and all of a sudden, everything just falls apart. And one of the reasons is because occasions like that demand the best out of us. In the book of John, in chapter 13, Jesus said to his disciples, I'm going to give you a new commandment. They said, oh, okay. He said, it's that you love one another. And they said, oh, okay. We know we're supposed to love one another. And then he added, as I have loved you. Now that raises the bar, doesn't it? It's easy to love one another as we think we ought to, as some do. But how about raising the bar and loving one another like Jesus loves? Did you ever stop and just ask, how did Jesus love? Unconditionally? Yeah. Unreservedly? Yes. With initiative? Yes. You can just make a list of ways that Jesus loved people. And that's exactly how we are to love one another. Peter wrote in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 21 that we are to love one another with a pure heart fervently. Now, two things in that are worthy of note. First of all, with a pure heart. That means we don't just pretend. Pretend is when you love somebody to their face, but as soon as they turn around, you go, ha, 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 I'm not too sure about them. With a pure heart, fervently, that means with feeling, with emotion, not something just on the surface. And I think one of the things that people say about the Seymour Church is, I believe those folks love one another over there. And I believe they're right in that assessment. I believe they're right that we do love one another with a pure heart fervently. And I believe they're right when they say that we should love one another as Jesus loved us. And I believe we're striving to do that. I have made given no mixed signals about it. I'd like to live long enough to see that building, the auditorium, built on the lot next door. But I can't make that happen. You can't make that happen as an individual. But working together, you know what? I think it would probably surprise us what we can see develop and happen. Because we love one another. We let one another know that. People who observe us are aware of it because they see it in what we say and what we do. So you want to have the right attitude. You want to get things done. You want us to go forward in a good way. Let's love one another with a pure heart fervently. Number 2, write down cooperation. I'll tell you what, that is a tough one, because you know how it ought to be done? My way. Exactly the way I see it, the way I think it ought to be done, the way we did it back there, or over there, or 40 years ago, or whatever. We've got to say, if we're going to pull this thing off with God's blessings, we've got to come together as people who respect one another enough that we can work together. I think one of the secrets of good leadership, and this is true in our country, it's true in the church, is that we realize that there are people who know a lot more about things than we do. You cannot be a master of all things. One of the things that amuses me is the fellow who has never preached a sermon, has never been in a class where anybody's been taught to preach, how to make sermons, has no background and no experience. And you know what he does? He's the fella who corners me in the back and tells me how I should have done it. And I have said I'm not a violent person. But I tell you, that just brings out the worst in me. Because I think that's one of the things I know a little bit about. A lot of things I don't know anything about. And I admit that. And I think a good leader says, I want to be connected to people who know how to do stuff. And I want to listen to them. I want their input. I want to cooperate together with them in getting this job done. 1 Corinthians 12, I think most of you, when I get to 1 Corinthians 12, will say, yeah, I know what that's about. That's that body is compared to, a physical body compared to a spiritual body. But beginning at verse 21, Paul wrote, and the eye cannot say to the head or the hand, I have no need of you. Nor again the head to the foot, I have no need of you. No, much more, those members of the body which seem to be weakest are necessary or are important. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor. And our unpresentable parts have greater modesty. What's Paul saying? He says all of our body is made up of various members. And we cannot say to any part of the body, I have no need of you. Because we need every part of the body. Have you noticed when a part of your body doesn't work well or at all, that some other part either has to make up for that or it doesn't get done? That's true in the physical body. That's also true in the spiritual body. I think we need to have a cooperative spirit where we say, what do you think? What ideas do you have? How do you think we ought to do this? Because I've learned from experience that sometimes when you have that knee-jerk reaction and you go off thinking you know all about everything, it doesn't take very long for you to realize that you don't. And you should have been a bit more patient. Nehemiah 4, it's amazing, the plan. Because the enemies of Nehemiah said, we're not going to let you build this wall. We're just not going to do it. And Nehemiah said, watch us. And they said, first of all, if you're building, you build, but if you're not building right now, you get your weapons and you stand guard. And then you switch around. And you stand guard and you lay brick. He says, cooperate together. Just as surely as you needed some bricklayers, you needed some guards too. And when those enemies of God's cause said, why don't you come down and talk to us on the plains of Ono? And I can imagine that Nehemiah said, oh no. I don't have time for that foolishness. I'm building a wall up here. We're building a wall up here. We're cooperating together to get it done. And if you think you can come up here and stop us, you realize that you're going to hit a buzzsaw. And those enemies of Jesus ran their mouth, but of the wall ran their mouth, but they stopped at that point. Let me give you another word. But let me read something Andrew Carnegie said. It marks a big man or a big step in a man's development when he comes to realize that other men may be called on to help him do a better job than he can do all alone. Oh, really? How many of us say, well, I kind of like to do things on my own. I just feel better when I do it by myself. That is arrogance gone to seed. It really is. It takes a big man to realize that there are others who can help and have ideas. And by the way, just let me say this, ladies, I'm on your side. Sometimes ladies have good ideas. Like they probably know a little bit more about what color we ought to paint the auditorium than the guys do. But who usually makes the decision? Men pick the carpet, men pick the color we paint it, men pick everything, and then they wonder, well, you know, we got a lot of people who don't like that. You know why? You didn't ask the right people. You didn't ask the people who know more about that than you do. Number 3, write down appreciation. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Paul writes, this is one of his final books. He's coming to the end of his life, and he's going to give some advice as to how we ought to live. And he says in chapter 5 and verses 12 and 13, and we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves. You know, somebody who's working hard likes to know that what they're doing is appreciated. Now here, admittedly, the emphasis in context is on elders. Let our elders know. And maybe just stop right there and make a commercial. Have you told John, and I'll have to think who our elders are. I think Rusty's one back there, and Brian. Not that I don't know. Have you stopped them recently and said, I want to tell you I appreciate the good job you're doing? Have you? Why not? Why not? Have you stopped our deacons and said, I want to tell you, I know you have a big job to do. Thank you for that. Now, I probably get my share of the accolades because, you know, I sit back there on my stool and you can't get out until you said something. You know, I won't let you go. I won't turn you loose until you said something. But how long has it been since you just took somebody aside that has done something wonderful? How many of you said to Gabriel this morning, man, you surely did a great job reading Scripture? I was so amazed at that boy. I will have to tell you that he's also volunteered for something else. He said he would read and he would help pass communion. And if we would get some other kind of communion bread, or if we'd get rid of that communion bread that we have, he'd make communion bread for us to use. Now, there's a boy that's willing to put his mouth or his intent where his mouth is. And I agree that stuff at the bottom of that second cup is not the best in the world now, is it? It's representative and it serves its purpose, but I think that Gabriel and some of the rest of you think, I'd like to have something a little better than that. So someday if you get something and the bottom of that is not what we normally have, go thank Gabriel. He's the one. You know, true appreciation will eliminate criticism and gossip and divisiveness. I don't have time to complain about the person I'm telling how much I appreciate them, if I'm sincere. I don't have time to work with you if I'm telling everybody what a bum you are and how little you do and how I can't stand you. Let's be people who express our appreciation. So your assignment, class, is this. You tell somebody, this week, and I don't count, you tell somebody this week how much you appreciate what they're doing. And be sincere about that. Be honest. Don't make it up. Be honest about it. Expressing appreciation has been compared to grease in the gears of a machine. Now, some of you don't get that, but I suspect some of you do. It makes others do their work much better, makes things run more smoothly. Number 4, write down submissiveness. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, listen, wives, punch your wife, because you're just sure that I'm going to talk about wives being submissive to their husbands. No, I'm really not. I'm going to read a passage from Ephesians 5. And I want you to see what verse 21 says about this whole matter. Submitting to one another. That can't be right. Submitting to one another in the fear of God. I'll tell you what a difference that makes in a congregation when we submit to one another. Of course, we are to submit to our elders. Of course, wives are to be in submission to their husbands. But of course, this verse says that we are to submit to one another. And let me say again, there are likely those who know more about what we're doing than we know. I wouldn't attempt to tell John McBroom how to build a house or a building of any kind. He said he's been working on plans for that building over there, and I didn't say, now I want you to bring them by and let me okay them first. I wouldn't even know which way to turn them, John. I wouldn't know what anything meant on there. I'm going to let you do that. That's your wheelhouse. That's what you do. And there are others in the building that do similar kind of things. I wouldn't tell, well, I might, but normally I would not tell Chris anything about a computer, how to fix it. Because he would say, have you rebooted? I'd say, what? What? Reboot it. What's that mean? Turn it off and turn it on. Oh, okay. Well, I fixed that, Chris. I wouldn't tell him. He's an IT guy. That's what he does for a living. They pay him to do stuff, to know stuff like that. So I think we need to make sure that we submit to people. Now, this is politically incorrect, and I don't care, to say that too many chiefs and not enough Indians can be a problem. Just let me be an Indian. And I'm still hacked off over the fact that they changed the name of the Cleveland Indians. I still am not over that. I'm sorry. But sometimes we just need more people on the ground to do the work. Well, I have one more. Write down peaceableness. Romans 14:19. Let's read it. Paul is writing to the church at Rome that surely needed a lesson on this. And he said, therefore let us pursue the things which make for peace, and the things by which one may edify another. Being at peace with one another involves the way that we walk worthy of our calling, Ephesians 4 says. It means we ought to be able to get along and dwell together in peace. That's not always easy. It just isn't always easy. There are so many things that threaten to rob us of our peace. We need to be people who work at really getting along. Gwendolyn lives in a group home. She comes home on Fridays and spends the weekend with us. She goes back, and one of the girls who lives in that home is a little hard to get along with. And as a matter of fact, she likes to hit people. And so you have to understand that those who are the caretakers can't really do anything. They can't grab her and shake her grates, you know, because that'd be against the law. So they just have to say, well, I'm going to write that down. Don't you do that anymore. And we've taught Gwendolyn, when that happens, just walk away. Just walk away. And so now that's her mantra. She says, she hit me. I said, what'd you do? I walk away, Dad, Papa. It's my girl. And sometimes we just have to walk away. Nothing is gained by standing toenail to toenail with somebody and having a yelling match. And see, you can insult the other one the worst. Sometimes we just have to walk away and live at peace with one another. And we must not let our progress rob us of our peace. Now, I'm glad the things that are happening to us. I will tell you that every night I thank God for the love and growth of this congregation. The fact that we get along, we work together, and good things are happening. But I also pray that we would always continue to act in a way that would help that. Because in the end, it's God's game, and He determines what happens. Let's just not get in His way. Let's just cooperate and let Him through us cause good things to happen. When we get our attitudes right, did you ever wonder what God has in mind for the Seymour Church? Can you imagine? Can you imagine what the potential is here? You realize that we live in a wonderful area for growth. That we live in the triangulation of Knoxville and Merville and Sevierville. I've been here long enough to know how to pronounce those terms. And we're surrounded with people who work, have good jobs. And we're right there in the middle serving Jesus. And we have a good reputation in the area. And so I really think that God can do great things if we'll just let Him. If we'll just cooperate with Him. Let Him call the shots. And we develop the things that we talked about tonight. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.